Our first guest tonight may have one of the most recognizable faces in Canada. Television can do that for you, except perhaps in our case. But Arlene Dickinson is also, and more importantly, one of the most respected and perhaps most envied people in Canada for her outstanding success as a businesswoman, entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and philanthropist.
You're not kidding. As most of you would know, Arlene spent 8 years on the panel of CBC's huge hit show, Dragon's Den, an opportunity that fell in her lap, so to speak, by being recognized as one of Canada's most powerful executives as owner and president of Venture Communications, a marketing and PR firm. And I've got to say, right off the top, I've always thought that you and Jim Treliving were the most level-headed and fair-minded people on Dragon's Den.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's especially nice to have you here with us. Before we get into your background, let me start by asking about the net effect on you personally of doing Dragon's Den. All positive?
You know what, I would say that it was surprising. I still find it really interesting when people will say, "Hey, Arlene," I'll think it's somebody I know, and then I realize that they know me from the show. So I still get surprised by the outpouring of love for the show that I get to be the benefactor of. So it's actually really interesting, and it did impact me. I mean, you can't be in a public place and not have it impact you, but I hope it didn't change me. I think it certainly made my life richer, though, and not, I don't mean financially richer, I mean just from a richness of experience.
You enjoyed the experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly made you famous, no doubt about that. And whether that's a good or bad thing, at least it's certainly an effect of television, except in our case. But you were already doing pretty well by 2007 when you got the call to join the show. But I want to go back to where it all began, because I'm sure a lot of viewers think they know you, but they don't really know much about Arlene Dickinson and your background. It all started, you were born in South Africa, just outside Johannesburg. Take us from there.
Born in just in a town called Germiston, just outside of Johannesburg. Came to Canada when I was about 2.5 years old, and we were very, very poor immigrants. I mean, we came here with absolutely no money, $50 literally to our name. Wow. And grew up in poverty, kind of not understanding too much about anything other than always being told by my parents how lucky we were to live in this country. And so from a very young age, I have had it ingrained in me that Canada is a place that we should be incredibly proud of and really grateful for. And then I went and got married very young, had 4 children, ended up divorced.
Very young, like 19?
19. Yeah. Well, because who doesn't know everything there is to know at 19 years old.
And this was all in Calgary, where you first went to? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So at that time, was continuing on to university or working not a priority, because you sort of went into another stream pretty quickly?
Yeah, I graduated high school at 16, and then I didn't want to go to university because I didn't think I could pass university.
Wow.
And I wanted to
think that you didn't have the confidence.
Yeah, I didn't have the confidence. And plus, I also wanted to get married and have children. It was really my goal was to have kids. And so I got married at 19 and never had a chance to go back to school. And my father had a PhD in education. That was always a big disappointment to him. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, you didn't do too bad.
No, thanks.
But you began where you raised your 4 kids for sort of the first decade or so of your post-married life, I guess, or married and post-married. And then you started working with the company you now own, Venture Communications.
That's right.
In 1988. Was that you mentioned to me earlier that you had worked for CTV, but it was basically your real entry into the workforce, I guess, getting into venture. Yeah. And how did you end up, within 10 years, taking over the company?
I worked really hard. I worked really, really hard, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think what I uncovered was I had an entrepreneurial bend that I didn't even understand until I started to own my own business. And as I got into business, I started to realize how much I loved it, and I just wanted to make a success of it. And to me, I always thought that hard work and commitment to excellence was going to get me ahead, and it did. And I worked hard till I bought my partners out.
Yeah, but working hard and working smart are different things. So you must have realized there were opportunities that weren't being tapped there.
Yeah, well, we started in a recession, so I think you have to learn how to bootstrap your business really quickly when the market's not great.
You know, as Helen and I would both know from our careers, because we've done much the same as you have, there are hundreds of marketing and PR companies in Canada. And most of them are quite happy to just roll along with a few good clients and pay their employees relatively well, and that's fine. But you really took venture from a small operation, and within not many years,
Yeah, you grew
really
it
took
very
it over
fast.
the top. How did you do it?
I've always believed that marketing is about business, and so I've focused on delivering something to our clients that I believed other agencies weren't focusing on, which was trying to make sure that we were delivering solutions that were not just creative, but were highly accountable to what the business wanted. And by focus, because I didn't come from the business, I didn't come from the marketing side of things, I didn't understand why marketing wasn't just doing everything it could to make businesses successful. So I focused on that and focused on our customers. And it turns out that actually really matters in the service
and
business.
acquiring new customers and doing more for them, I guess.
Right,
that's all
not
part
being
of it.
not being attracted by winning awards, but being attracted by building businesses.
Yeah,
Bingo.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Let's shift now to Dragon's Den and tell us about how that happened for you. You weren't on the first season of the show, but presumably you knew the show when you got the call and were invited to join.
I'd watched it at home the first season, and I got the call from CBC asking me if I would come and audition for the show. And I remember them saying to me, "Listen, this call could change your life." And I thought, "Oh, come on, like, how can a call change my life?" But it turns out a call can change your life.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I went down and reluctantly auditioned, and I thought I blew the audition because I got mad at Kevin in the audition, and we had our first fight, and then
And that probably made it happen.
that's probably
great TV.
apparently that's what
Yeah.
they liked. So then they asked me
we
to
should
join.
argue more.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how it started, but when you actually got on the set and then started doing the show, did you know you were onto something that you really loved, or did that take a while to acquire a sense of?
It was, I would say that they really literally they sat us down in the chairs and the cameras turned on, and there was no,
So you just had to
there
be
was no
yourself.
kind of prep, there was nobody told us what to say or do. And so you had to love it, and I did love it because it was about business, and it was about marketing, it was about helping businesses, and it was about entrepreneurs and all these things.
you were
that
right at home there.
Yeah, I felt right at home because of that. I mean, still was intimidating, and I still felt way over my head, and I still felt afraid, and all of those things.
Did
but
that
it
ever
was-
stop at some point?
It became less about fear, perhaps, in the end, and more about making sure that we were continuing to grow the show and making sure that I was continuing to grow as a person on the show. And so I think it became more about making sure the contribution was adding value to the entrepreneurs.
What were some of the qualities that you looked for in the supplicants that came before the dragons? It seems to me that you, first of all, had to be very, very careful in listening to what they were saying so that you weren't going to say something the same as Kevin or Jim or Rob Herjavec or whatever. But what were you looking for anything different, do you think, than those guys were?
For sure. I mean, the dynamic on the show is first you're listening to the entrepreneur and trying to, as you said, pay close attention to what they're saying, but then you're also listening to the noise on the, on the panel of what everyone else is saying and thinking. So you're weighing all these things in real time. And I always I was always much more about the story, the persistence and the perseverance and the kind of the self-actualization of the entrepreneurs. Were they aware of who they were? Did they know what they perhaps were lacking? Were they listening well themselves? Were they, were they
taking advice?
Were they also able to push back when they needed to and hold up to their own? So I think we all say it's about the entrepreneur. But at the end of the day, there are very, very few brand new ideas that you go, okay, it's the idea, like that idea is crazily good, and I don't care how good the entrepreneur is. You always look for both.
Yeah.
So you want a great idea, but you really need, above anything else, you need a fantastic entrepreneur.
You mentioned before we started the interview that you actually would see maybe 12 different pitches in the course of a day's taping, and maybe 4 would get on the show.
Yeah.
And maybe snippets of others. It is a long day, but we're both wondering if you ever invested in any pitches that didn't get on the show, but you thought maybe the pitch was dull, but the product was, or the people were pretty compelling.
Yes, for sure. Lots of times, either after the show aired, we would say no on the show, and then I would talk to them again afterwards and realize that no, I actually think there was something here, or vice versa. We would say yes on the show. It didn't air because it wasn't, necessarily the best TV in the world, and then we would do the deal afterwards. So for sure.
Yeah. So what were some of the most interesting businesses that you personally invested in because they were so compelling as pitches, or because the idea or the design or the possibilities were so great?
Well, I've done a couple really fascinating deals. I'd say I always lay claim to the fact that I did probably the best return deal on the show, and I'm 99% sure it's true. That with OMG's Candy, which was a deal that I bought into for $250,000 for 50% of the company, and they've done incredibly well. They're based in Winnipeg. Balzac's Coffee, which is a local brewery, a coffee distillery cafe, which is fantastic. She's not going to be happy. I'm going to say that again. Balzac's Coffee, which she started off in the distillery district, and now she's opened up a number of cafes around Ontario.
Absolutely.
And then Green Lid, which is a compostable bin for waste, which is a fantastic company that's built by two young brothers who are entrepreneurial PhDs in chemical engineering. They're just fantastic. So companies that are diverse but are really about bringing products to the marketplace, which is what I'm love the most and what I'm most passionate about, which has kind of led me to why I started District Ventures, which is, you know, trying to build these companies and help support the ecosystem in Canada for these companies.
Do you ever, can I just ask about this?
Of course you can, my dear.
Were there any real surprises? You know, companies that you thought were sure winners that flopped, or vice versa?
Yeah, there were companies that I felt were going to do better than they did do, and generally, I mean, that's just the reality of business. If everything was going to be a home run, we'd all be rich, right? It's not. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work. There's always a stumbling block that you can't anticipate, and so some people just face the challenges differently, and so some of these deals don't do well afterwards. But you know, it's not for lack of trying.
You were one of 5 experts on the Dragon's Den panel. And presumably you were an expert. You had all the answers. But did you yourself, over the course of 7 years, learn a lot from the experience, and if so, what?
So much. You know what, this is going to sound maybe perhaps esoteric, but I would say that what I learned the most is that everybody really does have a dream. And that the Canadian dream really does deserve to be heard and elevated and have an opportunity to be real. And so we're so fixated sometimes on other nations' dreams that we forget that our dreams are equally as big and equally as strong and equally as opportune, have great opportunity and are compelling and inspiring and all those things. And so I just learned that anytime somebody came down those steps, I learned to not believe I knew what they were going to say before they said it, and to listen intently to what people were really telling me, and to hear their dreams. And whether I thought they were bad really didn't matter. At the end of the day, it was their dream. They deserved to have it.
Well said.
Yeah, very well said. So you yourself, you've written a few books in the last few years, and you've started an enterprise called You Inc.
Right.
Tell us what those are all about.
So You Inc. Is part of Venture, which is it's a community of about, I think there's close to 30,000 members now who are entrepreneurs in Canada, who go online. It's free, anyone can join, and we just provide resources on how to build your business but we do it in a digital way, so you can do it from anywhere in Canada. And you get all sorts of mentorship and information and support and direction. And that's what that site's about. And then as I said, I started District Ventures, which is a not-for-profit accelerator for people who are in the consumer goods category.
Right. And on the books that you've written?
The books were, the first one was really just talking about kind of the idea of persuasion, because persuasion is such an important aspect of being a good entrepreneur and good human being, I think, because I believe in a win-win. And then I went to do a book called All In, which was all about the entrepreneurial life and what it really is, because people think it's romantic and they think it's easy.
It's a lot tougher than that.
Oh my goodness, it's so hard. And I feel so sorry for people who live with entrepreneurs, right? So, because we put them through hell. So I wrote that book to kind of help people not feel alone.
Yeah.
Arlene, you left the Dragon's Den after last season, and you had also done 2 other shows on CBC, one with Jim Treliving called The Big Decision, in which you and Jim helped businesses that were struggling or trying to expand or whatever. Is that series now dead forever, or is it something that might come back? Because you mentioned before we were on that you had a pretty good audience,
Yeah.
and you also had another show. Tell us about both of them. And
Recipe to Riches was a great show. I was just from there I was kind of the marketing expert of people who are bringing food products to market, and whether we thought they could actually be marketable in store. So that was a fantastic show that was in partnership with Loblaws, and it was really fun to do. Big decision was really about seeing whether you could do turnarounds for these companies that were really at the edge of the cliff, and whether you could come in and help save them and build them. And maybe it will come back. I would love to do it again. I thought that was a great show. That was a really interesting
a good concept.
show.
Yeah,
Lot of work on that show, because you're on the road crossing Canada looking at businesses, but it was fun. So maybe.
So last question, what's keeping you busy these days? Investing, writing, grandchildren?
all of the above. I'm investing in the consumer packaged goods space. I have started District Ventures, a not-for-profit accelerator, and of course my company Venture, but grandkids and family always first, and then, although they might say, yeah, Mom, I'm not so sure, you're not always here, but in my heart, always first.
Yeah, and 7 grandchildren, is that right?
7 grandchildren.
Yeah.
would you ever want to go back to Dragon's Den if the call came?
Maybe.
Okay, well,
never know.
I've learned in life, never say never, right?
yeah, no, never say never, and it's been wonderful
Thank
having
you
you
for
on
being
the
with
show
us.
today.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much. Coming up after the break, a woman who's been a trailblazer in the film and television industry in Canada, Helga Stephenson.